This is the Green Room.
Hey guys, welcome to another Green Room. So that's how we roll.
It's better than most. That's better than most.
Well, hey.
So it's just kind of like, but
Mr. Gemini.
Philly D.
Clickety clack, a fact check, a Miss JD.
And tonight we have a guest on, and it's probably going to be a lot easier for you to just kind of introduce yourself and give there's a lot of stuff to tell. So please feel free to take the stage for a minute.
Okay. Well, I'm Rhonda Rive, and I'm a lifelong learner. I just love to learn. And so I have an MBA, and I used to have a corporate job, and then I got injured on the job, which led me into holistic modalities. And so for the last 35 years, I've been always going to find a real job, but I have opened my own holistic practice. And so there's over 33 different modalities that I do. Some of it is distance healing. I do workshops and classes and have an Institute of the Healing Arts. I now have a second master's in communication. And it's interesting because my stuff from marketing and communication actually overlap into the holistic community. And I do a lot of things about how the mind-body connection and the things that we say and how different things persuade us. So I do that. My passion is numbers. I've done numbers since I was a little kid, and it's not numerology. It's way more in depth than that. Numerology is just like some little snapshot that they took about 2,000 years after Pythagoras condensed everything down into math being the universal language. And so I do a specific healing session based on your numbers. Again, that can all be remotely. I just recently got a quantum physics biofeedback and frequency machine. So I do that as well. That's all distance, or you can do in person too. But you're probably not going to travel to Iowa, which is where I live. So I been doing this over 33 years, almost 35 years in the holistic field. And it is fascinating. It's the more that you learn, the more you want to learn. So, and RhondaRive.com. That's the way to find me. If you go to RhondaRive.com, you'll find my phone number. You'll find my YouTube link. You'll find my LinkedIn link. You'll find my Facebook link. So that's really the easiest way. And it's Rhonda, RhondaReif.com.
Nice. That was awesome. That was absolutely perfect. Yeah, but that was.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about with that.
Well, so that was the thing that got. Yeah, with you was the fact that you're very adamant. It's not numerology, which is a very specific field, but it is numbers driven. So the fact that it's a numbers system and one from Pythagorean, that's some serious old school math, and we're all uber nerds. So I saw that, I was like, yeah, I want to see what this is about. I want to hear some more about this.
So you want me to tell you the difference? Is that what you want me to explain first, or what would you like?
Is it more of what's the phrase I'm thinking of, the geometric math?
Well, there's a lot of healing that has to do with geometria, but it's all hooked together. It's all hooked together. And numbers, like I said, numbers are the only universal language. And people will say, oh, but music is a universal language. But guess what? Music is numbers. And Pythagoras is the one who put that together and came up with the harmony of spheres. He did all of those things. And he did that by listening to a person that was hammering metal. And he understood that. I think that they were, I don't know what they were doing, making something out of metal. But he was listening and he heard the beat. And then that's how he came up with the harmony of spheres. But he is the one, he was, 500 BC, and he came up with a lot of Pythagorean theorems, but he is the one who learned that everything in the universe vibrates at a frequency. And if you can reduce it down to a numerical value, it has a predictability. So a leaf that has 3 leaves, like poison ivy, is going to be something that's sort of like you leap before you look. It's going to be kind of a dangerous kind of thing. So that vibrates at the 3. And so you can even to plants and animals and people's names and all of that. And it's also ancient and biblical too. It goes back to with the Zohar and the Kabbalah, the ancient Hebrews, but Pythagoras, was doing this, and he's the one who discovered it, and people don't realize that it's math-based. Then what happened in about 1300 BC, which would have made it 1800 years after Pythagoras, is that they discovered that they could cherry pick his work. And so they developed numerology. The tarot deck is based on numbers as well. So once you learn the meaning of the numbers, again, you can look at the tarot cards and that can tell you what's going on. You can look at the numerology. So what has happened, though, is that people don't realize that there's a whole science behind it. And I did a podcast a couple weeks ago with the guy, and he was just convinced everything I did, that it was all witchcraft. And I'm like, it's not witchcraft, it's science. And it's because of this association that numerology is linked to tarot, is linked to witchcraft, is linked to, the occult and all of that kind of stuff. So they've cherry picked it, and that's why it's accurate. So there's going to be overlap with numerology, but that's because they took something that was like 100 miles long that Pythagoras developed, and they took a quarter of a mile of it, and they utilized that in order to do that. But my stuff goes much deeper. I look at 22 different numbers that you have in your chart and all of that. And most people that do numerology look primarily at the birth date or just the total name. And then also I take a look at my thesis that I did in grad school was on persuasion of name letter similarity. And it's a whole marketing background communication tactic that they've known for years, that you are more likely to be persuaded by someone who has letters that are similar to yours in your name. You're more likely to gravitate to live places or streets or buy products or donate to political candidates who have similar letters to your name. And so there's that whole thing too. So then I look at the numbers. So when I did my thesis, of course, I wanted to do it on basing it on the science of numbers, which is what Pythagoras taught, and see if there was a difference between the numerical value, the spelling and all of that. Well, the teacher's like, well, that's not scientific. So I went ahead and I did it based on just to see if people were more likely to open an email from someone who had a last name identical to theirs, or was it someone who had one that was close in the spelling, and then someone who was a complete stranger, like that didn't have the same number. So we used Smith because that was the most common name in the pool that we had of people to send emails to. And I spelled it Smith, SMITH and SMYTHE. And then we did Hyde. And so I had similar letters, but not as many. But I did that on purpose because I used that. And of course, the teacher didn't know. He might have suspected. I did it so that it would have the same numerical vibration as Smith, SMITH. So I have a book coming out. It's not done, but there's going to be a whole chapter where you get to read that scientific study as a bonus because, it's not as boring as it sounds. But basically what happened was zero opened the email with SMYTHE. And they should have, because there was more letters in common than Hyde. And so, but they did. The equal number of people named Smith opened it as the equal number of people named Hyde, which was spelled so that it had the same numerical vibration of 6. So anyway, it was just really interesting that there is something to this, that we are attracted to certain frequencies. So then that led me on the journey to take a look at when I do people's charts and their numbers. I don't just look at, what is that? Like Bob is a 1. And so, but the letters of Bob are 262. So if you were going to do something, Pat is also a 1, but he's a 712. So those are going to have a different frequency, even though they're both a 1, than if they were identical. And that's something that numerology doesn't do either, and that's not even necessarily maybe something that I learned from Pythagoras, but yeah, there's just been more in-depth study with that and how this kind of all came about of me looking for podcast is that I'm in a book that actually made the Amazon bestsellers list, but it's a compilation book and it's called Business Life and the Universe. I'm in volume 6. And I did my story about how, because people were like, during the pandemic, this is what I did was numbers. And I'm like, really? Like I've been doing this for everybody for years and nobody in Iowa really cares. I think it's fun. But then people were really interested and then they wanted to have a healing based on their numbers and they wanted to, adjust their environment, like, because the prices that you even charge can affect what kind of customer that you get. And so, it's one of those things. And I started noticing during the pandemic that, you order stuff from stores and I never paid attention to addresses. I just knew where the grocery store was or the actual restaurant was. I started noticing that certain numbers were in those addresses. That's why I went to that store or that restaurant. It wasn't really necessarily because I had the best food. I just started noticing that there was that attraction with that. So then I started offering the little workshops and doing healings and doing people's charts and just really loved it. But so then I got invited to be in this book and I talked about, they're like, well, how long have you been doing this? And I said, well, I've always been really good at math And I've been doing it since I was probably around 11 or 12 years old, because I had this near-death experience as a child, and I was having all these dreams. And of course, this would have been 50 years ago. So you didn't talk about that kind of stuff. And I actually, when I died, I went to heaven, and I was there, and Jesus met me. Now, I'm not talking religion. I just think that as a child, that's probably the only religious figure I would have known who that was. So I'm there, and he says, "Come feast from the table of wisdom and knowledge." And I'm like, "Oh my God." And it was like a smorgasbord. It was like, "Take what you want." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to take everything." Like I took it. And I think that was part of that, because then I started having those dreams. So my mom got me a dream book to interpret, which also had this chapter on numbers. So, and then also on zodiac. So I kind of got into that, and I'd done that since I was a kid. So it's just been one of those things where it's been kind of this sort of journey. And then when I was in high school, because I was good at math, the professor in our algebra class was advanced algebra. And he had this problem. This was long before Good Will Hunting movie. And he had this problem he put on the board, and he said, "Okay, anybody who can solve this by the end of the year can be in this special club, and you'll get out early, or you can come to class late, or whatever." And so I took it home. I did the problem. I solved it the same night. I was the only student that he ever had solve it. And then not only that, he told me that I solved it differently than his solving solution. So he was pretty amazed at that. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The name of that club that he had developed was called the Pythagorean Brotherhood Club. Now, fast forward then, here I am, 30 years later, learning about Pythagorean mathematics, learning about the vibrations, learning about the energy fields, and all that kind of stuff. So, there's just, if you look back, you can kind of see where the stones and everything kind of connects, it all connects. So that's kind of the long and the short of it. So, what do you have some questions for me about that, or?
Is the reason why
Gemini's raising his hand?
I'm sorry, what?
Is this the reason why Nikola Tesla would only stay in rooms that were divisible? The number was divisible by 3.
So he's discovered that 3, 6, and 9 is the secret to the universe. And yes, 3, 6, I've got goosebumps. 3, 6, and 9 is actually really strong vibrational currents. So, like for instance, if you were in a year that added up to a 9, so let's just say it was 2007, because that's a 9, on March the 6th, 2007, that would be a supercharged energy day. So yes, that's why because he knew that the power of 3. And when you look at that and then you go back to marketing, it's the power of 3. You want to say your name 3 times. You want your phone number in the ad 3 times. You want to, try to get the client back through the door 3 times. Like it's the power of 3, it's just, 3 strikes you're out, or the 3rd time's a charm. So 3 is a really powerful number in the universe, but he knew that the 3, 6, and 9 combo was especially like this strong, very strong energy portal.
Yeah, we are massive believers in the whole 369 for sure. I mean, me specifically, a lot of the things I do, like even the volume of my TV or what channel I'll watch, people will laugh at me, but I'll legit modify myself so that I'll be in a relative state of something of a 3.
I just wish we had lost so much information that he could have provided to everybody, and he wanted to offer it for free, and I think as the story goes, like a bunch of his documents were just burned. I believe at the last hotel that he was in, or whatever, something like that.
Stolen. They were stolen. They were not burned.
No, actually, on record, all of his documents were seized by the government. They were sent to a young scientist to show if they had any validity. And that young scientist was Donald Trump's uncle. And when he passed, all of his files went to actual Donald Trump.
Yeah, but not all. There was a bunch of his not chests, like the trunks. They just realized they found like another ungodly.
There's some missing out of the evidence.
No. There's been new evidence that there's literally hundreds more that they're just finding. Like this guy had tons of stuff. Everywhere.
Oh, he was scratching the diaries like all the time, like nonstop.
That's all he was doing was cataloging his stuff.
Because he was constantly going into the ether and just kind of toying around.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what him and Einstein did. I mean, both of them were like mad believers in the idea of lucid dreaming, to like tap into the, like he was saying, the ether, but to get to the Akashic records, like the spot where all knowledge exists.
I wanted to say too, have you researched anything about Walter Russell, or do you have any interest in him?
I have not heard that name.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
So Walter Russell was a polymath who was one of the things when I've introduced it to you, I was saying Walter Russell from a very young age would go into a trance state. Like he would, I think
lucid dreaming.
Well, he would go out basically into nature and just meditate for days on end. So he'd go out for like 2 weeks, I think every year.
Yeah, I think it was once every summer.
After the first time it happened. But somewhere in one of those trance states, when he came back to the real world, if you will, and he started documenting some of this stuff, some of his findings while he was, off in the ether, that he saw a representation of the periodic table, but it was in like a spiral chart based on level of frequency. So he was actually able to break down the entire,
periodic table,
the chemical periodic, whatever the periodic table, and determined that
broken into gases.
Like he saw it this way. It was expressed instead of as a table that we're used to seeing. It was expressed in a spiral, and each rung on the spiral as it wound towards the middle was decelerating.
Like a DNA strand.
I can't remember if it was decelerating or it was
like
basically
half, but like half because you're only catching the one side, so it's not truly double sided. But he did see it.
But he had that basically in a vision, and I believe he discovered 6 elements that came before hydrogen, and it was like years and years later before we started discovering any of that.
Decades. But
nobody, of course, one of those guys, and nobody is not a household name. Nobody took him seriously. He was an artist. He was a sculptor. He was a Renaissance man. They say polymath is another term for that, I guess.
Interesting.
Da Vinci was big into math as well.
I think you would be, definitely. I think you would be into Walter Russell, though.
Yeah,
I wrote it down. I'll have to read up on it. Thank you.
I mean, I feel like Da Vinci was more of the the spiral math.
The golden mean.
That stuff where you get that where everything exists within it, where it actually will design basically like a shell layout of a snail or whatever. Like it gives you the multi layers and all that stuff. Yeah. That's why I'm gonna do it,
because the world spirals, and that was one of the things that Walter would say too.
Well, that's why I like Rhonda. I like your point where you said everything's based in music, and it's like music's based off of numbers, and it's like
music is math.
Math literally is the language. As far as I've been shown in multiple sets of evidence is math is literally the language of everything that we deal with, like everything.
And I grew up as a musician, like doing percussive instruments and marching band and all that for like decade and plus. And now that you're saying that, all that I can think of is like now when I look at sheet music, it's like, okay, yes, because literally you're like 1 and 2 and 3, and like everything's on a count. Everything deals with numbers. It's very. I never thought about music that way until you said that. But when I play it, all I'm doing is counting and like rambling numbers off to myself. It's like different drums are different numbers and different beats, Yeah,
and it wasn't it considered, I think, against the law at some point to play one of those, I don't know if they're called the devil's notes, or there was a chord progression that was considered to be demonic, or whether it was just kind of a bad energy. And then there was also another whole series of chord progressions that were considered angelic. So do you know anything about that?
I know C major is healing.
I think it has something to do with the 440 frequency, but, and that has to do with, I can't think. Right? I can't think of the name of it, but it's the, it's a certain frequency of numbers. And the 440 frequency, that it had something to do that prior to a certain thing like Gregorian chants were on one particular thing, and I resonate with that better. But then modern music and stuff came along, and it switched to 440, which actually then has more sort of mind control. That I think that there's been some studies about it being that it's mind control, that it's mind control numbers. And if you listen, that it even deals with like a certain syncopation. And that's why if you've ever listened to certain people speak, they sort of almost have that hypnotizing effect because of that frequency and the vibration and the intonations and things that they use with their voice.
Interesting.
We don't realize how there's all of these other things that are going on around us. We just think that everything's the same, just like with the numbers. People don't realize until I start rattling off. They're like, well, how many numbers can there be? I'm like, well, there's your credit card number, your phone number, your social security number, then there's your bank account number, your driver's license number, your license plate number, your house number. Like, that's just how many, and then it's just your birth date. People just don't realize that we are very numerically driven, and that's kind of how we are sort of identified. And so it's fascinating to me. It's just really fascinating.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to categorize like an entire, population is by some sort of number. So whether it's prefix, suffix, and something determinate based on when and where you were born, because it's all tied into that. I'm a
believer in that stuff. But that I love the idea of like we were just talking about the 440 in comparison to the 432.
Yes,
440 is an 8, 432 is a 9. It's almost the same, but not quite.
But on the holistic sound healing side, 440 does certain things to you, but 432, like she said, the 440 can like easily manipulate you in certain things, but then the 432 is used more for like resetting and like meditation and stuff like that. And then the 432 is used to like heal, but the 440 is used to raise.
And so let me explain to you how that, because I don't know if you guys know about the meanings of each number. So I'm going to just explain it like you're just learning it. So when you look at the 440, it adds up to an 8. The 4 is all about responsibility, dependability, reliability, loyalty. 8 is about structure. It's retentiveness. It's issues with money. It deals with being organized. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't have chaos, but if somebody moved your stapler, you would know it, even if you had like 32 stacks of papers sitting in the way. Like the 8 is just very functional like that. So when you think about it and then you apply that 440 frequency, that's exactly what it's doing, is that it's sort of pushing you into a box to fit into a certain thing to get a certain outcome. And then when you do the 432, the 4, of course, is the number of angels, but it's also dependability, reliability, loyalty. But 3 is the number of creativity. It also has to deal with ascended masters. And the 2 then is about partnership and relationships and working together. And it adds up to a 9, which is the greater good for the masses and healing and things at a global level. So the 432 is going to have a totally different thing. See, it's like a sentence. Like once you know what those things mean, you can read exactly what the actual hidden message is supposed to be.
It makes sense. Awesome when you get to hear it all spelled out like that. But I mean, I was joking around like this, every time I talk to a musician of any sort, I always ask that question about 432, and most of them just they're like, I heard about it once, but it really didn't mean it.
Off.
Whatever. I didn't think it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I was like, but no, seriously. I mean, orchestras used to tune their instruments to 432, because their instruments would stay in tune. Mm-hmm. They would suffer less damage. And as a matter of fact, if people had to vocalize during the production, it was actually easier to reach an A at 432 than 440, even though it was such a small amount. But then when you hear all the other things, and I had heard some or read somewhere that actually it was, there was a standard, but it kind of varied depending on what area you were from and what type of group you would play with, whether it was orchestral, big band, small band, whatever. But that there needed to be a standardization, and that I think it was Goebbels or something that worked for Hitler that actually set
Hitler. Mm-hmm.
It set it to 440 intentionally to try and, like you said,
she knows
control the masses. Like that's kind of crazy.
Well,
I'm sorry. Solfeggio frequencies. Before I forget, that's what I was trying to remember that we were talking about. That has the different music things. But yeah, Hitler is the one that definitely used the 440 frequency, and that's what I'm talking about. Like he had to. That's why he knew. Like he had a certain tempo and mannerism and things to do with that. But he also used the 440 frequency. That was in the book that I have. One of the books I have on numbers, it talked about that and the connection between the solfeggio I don't know if I'm saying that right, frequencies and then healing and with that too. So anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm glad you pronounced that and not me.
Well, I didn't say it was right.
Yeah, it would have been way worse if I had tried.
I mean, that's why I was like the idea that 440 and 432, like they're really close.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's almost like it's close enough that if you're doing it in the 440 as opposed to the 432, it's enough that those who would hear it would believe it. They're like, yeah, no, that sounds about right, but it's not even quite right. But
even musically trained ears can't tell.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
They can feel if something's off, but they can't tell which way. Or
that's why I'm like,
if they do the Pepsi challenge, they have no idea.
And that's why I'm like, that's why, especially going from 440, which is 8, to the 432, which is a 9. It's like you're almost there. Like you're almost. They both start with 4, which, like you were saying, has a certain representation, but not quite.
Okay, I have a good question on numbers dealing with frequencies. So 1,000 hertz is supposed to be like your, supposed to be like a natural anesthetic. So not anesthetic, I'm sorry, anesthesia. So if you have pain or something, if you hear 1,000 hertz as a frequency, it's supposed to alleviate any pain that you have in your body. So I'm curious on a numerical value, like on a number side, what is 1,000 equal? Because there's 5 numbers, but it's 1 and 4 zeros. So
every time a 0 appears in a sequence, it means that there's protection.
Wait, say that.
It means that there's protection. I'm sorry, what?
The whole statement again. When there's what?
Zeros.
Anytime there's zeros in a succession, it means that 1,000. She wanted to know about 1,000.
So if like 100, because you get 2 of them in a row, so 1,000 or 10,000. So it's basically like once you have like 2 or more zeros in a row.
Even if you, like for instance, with the 440 frequency, there's a 0 on it. So there's a certain level of protection. There is a certain level. There is a certain level where you could, exercise your free will and get out from underneath that because that level of protection is there. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to tap into it, but there is a certain level, or else we would already be overrun and controlled. Do you know what I mean? Like by things that were happening. So anyway, so anytime there's a 0 with a number, it means that there's a protection around it. So like if you were born on the 20th or the 10th or the 30th, you were born coming to this life with a lot of extra protection around you. So the 1 then is about new beginnings and starting and actually leading, but it's where you start. And so, that has a lot to do with it too. So there has to do with that. And then again, it's kind of a binary code as well too. So, but yeah, and then the frequency, the 1 frequency goes with, if you do Vedic stuff, it goes with the root chakra. So the root chakra then is the number 1. Well, obviously, if your root chakra is out of balance, then you are going to have everything out of balance because it's like a stuck straw. The energy just can't get through it to any other part of the body. So by opening that with that 1 vibration, you are going to then help to permeate, to help open up to the next level. So that could be part of it as well too.
Right. You'll begin the Kundalini Awakening on the chakra side. Interesting. It's love cool. This.
Yeah.
Oh, this is beyond cool.
I wish I had my glasses on right now because I just went to go push them up and realized I don't have them on.
That's why I said just after the intro, I was like, there's definitely a lot of stuff here that we could dig into because there's some parallel thoughts going on.
Again, when I was reading up on you,
I'm
like
seeing a lot of things lining up.
You're like, hey, I saw this, that, and the other, and you're like, I'd love to do this, and I started looking into it. And I was like, okay, this is a little bit of a twist. I like that because we're very much about what I guess what you would call the fringe science. The things that are like the Z points, the outliers, like the weird stuff. But it has just as much, if not more, influence on how everything kind of comes out. So to me, having that weird outlier, unique, interesting kind of point, it's like that's what we want to get into because
But it's that area, like I was telling you before, that area where science is at the bleeding edge. It's meeting up with where philosophy is at the bleeding edge, and where spirituality and religion come together, where this is really what we're looking for, those outliers, because there's a lot more going on than what we can tangibly perceive.
Yeah, touch, smell, like we can. Yeah, there's so much. We
operate on such a narrow bandwidth, to just assume just because you can't taste it, touch it, smell it, that it's not actually affecting you, and that's kind of ridiculous to think that, because but that's why I like the multiverse idea. I think is genius, because like you're so stuck in these 4 dimensions, I guess 3-4 dimensions, time, space,
Well, yeah. I mean, that's we're 3 and 4D dimensional, 3 and 4D creatures, because we have time and space. So you have the physical space, but then also the time related with that space.
Right. But how many other dimensions could exist right within this space? And just because we don't have the bandwidth to perceive them, it doesn't mean that they're not there and that they don't affect us.
There's probably infinite. I would say there's infinite dimensions within it, and we're only aware of I think 11.
Well, because you'd go crazy if you saw it all. I mean, how many clairvoyants probably went to this psych ward and died there? I mean, it's a sad thing to think about, but I mean, the witch trials in most cases were actually hunting down ancient forms of Christianity and burning them at the stake. So
how do we go from clairvoyance to that?
Because it's all about narrow-minded. It's narrow-minded thinking. People assume that that's the only existence, that's the only reality. Anything that falls outside of that is, whether it's,
or like Rhonda had mentioned before, people thought it was witchcraft when you deal with certain numbers. It's things out of a person's normal scope of reality or comprehension that they just dismiss and say, oh, well, since I can't comprehend this or I don't like this, it's that. And then they just put this connotation on it, which turns it for some people to not understand it, but it could be something wonderful, but just masked under the wrong name. Right. So people are deterred from viewing it when, if you look back at everybody's history, this is the basis of everything.
That's where my MBA in marketing comes to play. But then people are like, in the circles that I travel in, the people that are interested in it are people that are into numerology. So then when I say something like, well, it's not numerology, then it's like, then they're like, well, we don't know what to call you. It was like, well, I guess I don't know what to call me either then. But, I'm a numerist, which is an ancient thing for, somebody who loves numbers, but it's just way more involved than that. And it's just unfortunate. Again, it comes back to manipulation. Some people have manipulated things and they're going to put a label on something as bad or good. And it really isn't that. It's the charge we put with it, whether it makes it bad or good, So.
Thank you. That's something I run into in the yoga world, because I'll have people be like, oh, well, you're worshiping ancient Hindus. I go, okay, well, you have to think about intent. One person, maybe, okay, like just take lighting a candle, for example, something that can be, you're just doing a simple thing. You're lighting a candle. Okay, if that candle's on a birthday cake, you're singing happy birthday. If that candle's in a church or a synagogue, you're doing a prayer. If that church is in a worship seance circle, okay, you're doing it with some type of intent, with hoping for like an outcome of some spiritual entity is going to help you. It's all with intent. You could be doing the same action, but you could be doing it 5 different ways with 5 different intents, but yet the candle is still a candle. So
I like the fact that you're using the word intent. And I've been, especially with the idea of like frequency, energy, vibration, I've been kind of modifying the idea of energy to the word intent. Like what energy are you putting into this? What's your intent behind this? And, you could be resonating off this frequency that, blah, blah, blah. But what's the energy? And I think that's a really big driving factor, because that's you like entering into the universe. That's you being a part of the stream or the flow of all things. What's your intention? What's your energy? What are you trying to put in this? I like that word, intent. That's a real, because it kind of goes to the idea of being impeccable. You know, when you have good intentions, it's usually because you're being honest with yourself and the things around you. So your intent is all good, like literally all good. I like that, JD. Thank you. Intent. I like that.
You're welcome. It's a mindfulness practice.
But that's intent. What's your intent? What are you trying to do? What's the energy you put? I want to be mindful. I want to be good. I want to. That's why I'm like. To me, intent is a very impeccable word. I like that.
So there's a basic description or a descriptor for every number, like 0 through 9, and then when there's combinations.
Yes, and then 11, 22, and 33 are the master vibrations. Double digits will also have a strong frequency, but 33 is the highest vibration on the planet. And so the 33 frequency, that's a frequency of compassion and unconditional love. So it's, and when you have a master number in your chart, people either really like you or they really don't like you. I mean, they'll either gravitate to you or they'll avoid you. And it's because they don't know what the hell to think, you know? So, making
so much sense.
And there's so much about completion and everything in the 33 as well, because that's, well, I mean, everybody says that's the crucifixion year of Christ, but at the same time, that's also the number of spinal bones.
Yes.
Right. When you include all the ones that are fused at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Your coccyx.
Your coccyx.
Yeah. Yeah.
Generally speaking, not everybody has exactly the same number, but in general,
all in what are they in economy? All things considered, like if everything is the average, if it's like all is as it should be, it's 33,
right?
Which is also the Masonic number, isn't it?
Yes.
So that was a quick answer. That was a really quick answer about that. She was like, "Yes, it is."
The highest degree that you can achieve is the 33rd. And that's mastery level.
I want to know why.
And then it starts over again, I believe.
To that, like, what is that?
Well, because I'm so into numbers. Like, I know the different numbers. Like, I know them in and out. Like, you want to hear about 7, the most prevalent number on the planet? 7 virtues, 7 vices, 7 deadly seas, 7 major continents, 7 cervical vertebrae, 7 major planets, 7 days of the week. Like, you want to hear about that? Like, it's like, then the 4, there's 4 seasons, 4 suits in the deck of cards. There's 4, there's just all of these things that it's just like, I don't make a decision without looking at the numbers. Like, I look at the numbers. And so, because it tells me what is going on behind the scenes. What's that predicted outcome with that going to be? So, like you were like, okay, you better decide quick. Here's what's left. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a 12-day, which is a 3-day, and 4 plus 12 is going to be a 7. And then we're in a 7-year. So, okay, that's a 15. So that's a 5. That's a 14. So that's a 5. So today's about risk and change and spirituality and being dependable and, just going things with that too. Like and then it started at 7 o'clock my time, 8 o'clock yours. So 7 again, a number of the spirituality. So, so it's one of those things where, like, when I tell you, like, I don't make any kind of decision without looking at what is the number, what is the hidden message telling me. So of course, 33 is just like this really powerful number. And if you've done anything with 33s, you'll know that everything, like the Garden of Eden, is in the 33rd parallel, so it's not even just about your address, it's what parallel do you live in? And look around historically, all the things that have happened in the vibration of the 33rd parallel. Civil War started there. Both Kennedy brothers were assassinated there. There was all of the Middle East conflict. It starts in the 33rd parallel. All of the things that's been happening with the things that are, going on with, women's rights. It started over with, us pulling out of, Afghanistan. And again, not political, just saying 33rd parallel. And I said, it's going to circulate around the globe. And where did it come to? Texas in the 33rd parallel. So there's a lot of things going on there. Military bases. Most of our U.S. military bases have a military base around the world in the 33rd parallels. Now, of course, they're in other parts too, but the 33rd is like this really super intense number. And so...
and it's used a lot on different military bases. I will say this.
Really?
You said that. My husband's active duty military, and we're constantly stationed on different bases. So once you said that, I've just got like 4 visuals of like 3 different bases on where I've seen the number 33 on those different bases. So I'm
So
just
they're
like seeing
they're putting
flashes
it
of
out there on
signs with 33s or units that use the numbers 33 or like this is use it. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I've heard that before too, that all these, you know, that you travel in some circles and say something like ley lines and people look at you like you got three heads. But when you actually map it all out, you realize that all the major cathedrals are on ley lines that are on intersecting energetic areas, pyramids.
Yeah, pyramids, all of it.
I mean, anything
utilizing the Earth's frequencies.
You know what? So, all right,
are we getting back into Thoth again?
No, I have a question for you then. So, with this understanding, what is your interpretation, your experience, knowledge, or opinion, however you want to word it? What's your piece to say about the overall pyramids? Not even just like the ones in Egypt, but the fact that all of them relatively are on that same ley line. They come across multiple continents.
Well, they're on hotspots in the grid. Yes.
Well, right, and they all kind of. So, do you have a take on the fact that the pyramids of different shapes and sizes are on that relative line as well, or?
Yeah, and they're probably portals. They're probably like, something like from Stargate or something, like where they all line up, where they have all of this kind of stuff. Like, we don't know. There could be like gazillion aliens walking amongst us. Maybe every single bird is from a different planet. Every crocodile is from a different, like, we don't know who is from another planet that's amongst us. We don't really know, even when we incarnate here, where we come from necessarily. So I definitely think that there are some very strong vortexes, energy points, things that are going on with that, and I definitely think that it could be used as a portal. And that
the government is aware of it, and that the major religions are aware of it, especially Catholicism, and that everybody's kind of been, I don't want to say playing it to their own advantage, but it doesn't. I don't know that there's always a reciprocal attitude when people put structures, whether it's for the people or not. I'm not sure that that's necessarily always in the forefront. Whereas I'd like to think that the original people that built the pyramid, or the Great Pyramid in the Giza Plateau, we're actually looking to improve humanity. We're actually trying to, like the Mayans and stuff like that, like that they were looking to try and make things better for humanity, and maybe some of them it's said, I think the Mayans maybe actually succeeded and just vibrated out on a higher frequency and disappeared.
We've had that conversation before, where there's a mass quantity of, their population has just disappeared. And while what we see in the textbooks now is there was disease and there was influence and there was modifications, economically, all these different components that we want to say were the influences, but yet there's a mass quantity of spiritually minded individuals that literally vanished, and we have no evidence of them. Like there's food scraps, pottery, there's housing, like there's physical evidence that they all existed. But we're missing like over 1 million bodies or skeleton. Like there should have been vanished. Yeah, there should have been a larger section of remains.
And not to say, obviously, there was a lot of influence with influenza and all disease and stuff like that.
That to me was more the demise. There was like a subsection that basically, and if you look this up like 20 years ago, this was a thing. We've been trying to look this up. You look it up now, there's like no information on this and it doesn't exist. But I guarantee you there was an entire population of this spiritually minded, Mayan culture that just disappeared because they most likely ascended out of this planet or this timeline, or, however you want to, reference that.
Have you read the series of the Celestine prophecy books by James Redfield? Okay, so in his book, The Secrets of Shambhala, but also in the Ninth Insight, that is the point. The point is for us to get to that level where we vibrate at such a high frequency that we're still here on the planet, or we can leave and come and go to other dimensions, but we're not in a physical form. And so that when you were talking, that's what I was thinking about, is that, I could very well see that is just, either they come and go, but they're at a frequency, they're at a light vibration frequency that we can't see, just like there's certain things that we can't hear, that maybe dogs can hear. Like, I just think that there's, certain things that happen with that too. So when you were talking, that was what came to my mind.
Well, yeah, because I would agree, because it's not like they didn't disappear. We're just not, we're no longer registering them on our perception level.
Mm-hmm.
They could literally all still be alive, which, I mean, you know, spiritually, I'm sure they are, but they could literally be still walking this earth on the, you know, like literally the exact timeline we're on right now. And we just can't perceive it.
That's the whole New Age claim that a new earth has been prepared for us. And it's here, but it's on a different frequency understanding. And that you could quite literally like just kind of vibrate off of this plane.
Yeah, dude.
And that maybe that is what biblically what they were talking about, you know, and that whatever is in the lower vibration would stay here, but whatever here is, I mean, it's a different,
because I mean, that
different understanding of the frequency in the matrix of whatever this is.
Right. And I mean, like we were talking about earlier about perception of like time and place. I mean, 3D, 4D, when you're built within a perception of time and geographical, you know, association, you kind of get stuck in that construct. So when you can actually take that mentality and be like, well, no, you can still be in the same place in time, but on a completely different level or dimension, you're coexisting and you're just unaware, which, I mean, I'm sure any and all things do. We just, you know, again, we're not perceiving them.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you could take it from the macro to the micro too. I mean, you could say that there's a whole nother level of reality within the bacterium within our own bodies that we completely ignore, but it's a whole universe unto itself.
Oh, I guarantee you there is.
You know, it's not even like you have to dig that deep. It's just like we don't perceive at that level. Well, you know, it's not that it doesn't exist or that it's like something extra. It's part of what is, you know, and that, I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I had a friend one time tell me, she actually was a student of mine, and she said that sometimes she wonders if, like Horton Hears a Who, where there's Whoville and it's all so small, if each cell in our body isn't really its own Whoville. And I've never forgotten that. And that's like exactly what you're saying is like, we have no idea, you know, it's like, we don't know, like, because we're still learning, but we also as a society have been taught repeatedly, like not to think for ourselves, not to think outside the norm, to just do what we've been spoon fed. And so, you know, whatever that is, idealism or spiritual beliefs or, you know, even, you know, what we think should be healthy food.
Things are shifting in a different direction now, but I don't know that it's all necessarily for the best. I think, you know, keeping an open mind is one thing, right? But I definitely think it's traveling in a different direction than from maybe when you were a child. I mean, I definitely feel that there's more of a progression. People tend to be a lot more open-minded. I think people are realizing that reality ain't all it's cracked up to be, and we don't have all the answers. And even science tells us that. I mean, we're discovering things about quantum physics that flip the script on everything we understand about Newtonian physics. Like, it makes no sense when you look at it. It's like, how could something be here and then suddenly disappear and be there? But it can happen.
It's because all things are connected, which, I mean, so
within the quantum field.
Well, so, I mean, Rhonda, and I've had this thought myself, the whole like Horton Hears a Who thing. Dude, what the movie Osmosis Jones,
right.
I mean, there's been several, you know, representations of it where it's like, why can't it be on that scale? I mean, even was it Men in Black when they open up the locker and they look in, there's like a world, and then there's also I think Men in Black 2 where they open up another door and there's like another world, and they're just like, wait, what?
Well, no, it was the galaxy that was around the cat's neck. It was like the size of a marble.
But that's also that one too. That's what I'm saying. It's like there's been multiple representations, you know, throughout history, you know, whether it's, you know, comic books or movies or whatever else, but why can't it be? Why can't each thing fold in and on itself?
How would you ever know?
You know, we sit here and think that, you know, there's this vast, you know, universe and everything else, and it's like it could all just be literally this small little marble, and everything's so folded in on itself that you just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean,
it, or
you don't. This is all existing within a raindrop.
Do you know what this is making me think of?
Planet right now.
And I have to go back to the raindrop thing because okay, hold on. But this is the whole visualization thing that you guys have been talking about. So do you remember the Magic School Bus?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So like they shrink down into like microscopic levels, and then they enter the body, and then they view the inside of the body as like each organ is its own like village or like country or like its own like, you know, its own little universe. Like, and that's how they like showed you as kids. Like, it's like, oh, let's go into the heart. And then like the heart is like its own universe. And it's like, you know, all the intergalaxies within the heart. And then you go into, oh, let's go to the digestive tract. And then that's like a roller coaster of its own galaxy.
So that's why I like the Osmosis Jones, because it was almost like each spot in the body was its own town and its own like neighborhood and it really kind of put it into a, you know, a literal expression of what we're used to. But it's like, dude, you can go 2 inches, 2 miles, 2 years away, and it doesn't matter. It's your perception, how, you know, what distance or time or any of that is like.
And then going back to the raindrop. So this keeps coming into my head though. No, because we're talking about things manifesting as like a whole, and then like separating, and like when you change the frequency, it manifests into like different forms. So there's an experiment with the light, with the frequencies and like water. So they would turn the frequency of a certain thing in a box, and then they like drop the water in, and the water would like create these cool patterns and like do these things. And then it's like you change the frequency and different patterns change, and then like you stop it, and then it's just water. So one of the things I read recently
is a different thing.
Yeah. And one of the things I read recently, and it was like, you know, everything's interconnected, and we're just beings manifested in a human experience. So it makes me think of those water molecules, and it's like, okay, well, we're just vibrating at such a frequency that manifests like this shape. It manifests this body. It manifests. And then inside of this entity, inside your organs are manifesting at a certain frequency. Like your mind is resonating at another frequency. Like, so you're trying to like get all these frequencies within one to just stay manifested into this whole creature that we are as humans, but yet we're still just molecules vibrating at frequencies. So like whatever frequencies you're around are either going to raise or lower your personal vibration. So it's like it can be manipulated, and it's just,
I mean, that's why you don't want to.
It's so intricate, but it's everywhere and everywhere at the same time, and it involves everything. And the more it gets, people become more aware of it. It
was one
the
of
more
the
information comes out, and the more interesting
it is. And everything, all at all times and everywhere, whatever that.
One of the most elusive things that scientists have always been looking for is the theory of everything. And it's
that goes into the God particle, doesn't it?
I mean, yeah, but where do you separate God from any other particle? That's the problem. It's like midichlorians. It's everywhere.
That's why I think that's the irony of that situation when they're like, we're looking for the
energy
particle
that creates all these things. So we just break it apart and give it names. That means nothing. That means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I know.
That's the funny thing about it. Like we think we know something just because we can cut it.
But dude, that's why I'm saying like, we're out there looking for this one thing, and it's like no. All things are a thing, not like one, like literally a thing.
And that was one of the things that Walter Russell was really big on. He's like, everybody's looking externally for the answers to whatever question they have in their world. He's like, if more people were willing to look internally to see that the answers are already there in abundance, you just have to tune into them. That's all he did once a year.
Well, see, that's
and
why
he came out with the most amazing art forms. He came out with an understanding of chemistry and the elemental chart that nobody could understand. I mean, everybody else knew it by writ, knew it by study. Like he actually physically saw it.
He felt it.
Like he saw a manifestation in physical form in front of him, and it was a lowering. It was a lowering of frequency. It was a spiral where
I wouldn't say
the spiral went. Well, no, that the lowest part on the spiral was the highest, or the lowest frequency, and the highest was the highest frequency, because in his I don't even want to say philosophy. In his experience, his automatic assumption was that everything in existence is derived from light, and that everything in existence exists because of the power of light and these two opposing forces. One is gravitational pull, and it's basically an outward push. And so radiation and gravitation.
Yeah, dude, pulling in and pushing out.
Those two things create friction and twist the light into matter. And that's the way he viewed the entire universe.
Well, yeah,
that was his cosmology.
I was just I forget where, but I just heard this, the idea of like the yin and the yang. You know, when we look at it as a two-dimensional,
we're actually looking up.
I sent you this.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about it, like the yin and the yang, if you lay it out in an alternate dimension, now it represents, the
caduceus
helix. Yeah. Well, it's that spiral. It's the rung of the ladders, but twisted into and it's
like you're looking at a spiral staircase from the bottom looking up. So when you look at it, it's the yin and the yang. Yep. Is how he depicted it.
See, that's why I like the Walter Russell stuff. When you introduced me to it, was because of that. Is like it's all about perception. That's why all of a sudden we get this periodic table that's laid out flat, and now it turns into like a half a helix. So, Faye, you were going to say something, Rhonda? Go ahead.
I was, because from a numbers point of view, the number 6 is service. And it's about balance at the community level, and 9 is service at a global level. And when you put those two together, it looks like the yin and the yang symbol. But then look at it, because the 3 then divides into both of them. And there again is another overlap of this same thing of what you're talking about with Walter Russell, with the yin and the yang from the ancient Chinese cultures, Asian cultures, and then taking it back to Tesla. That 6 and that 9 is that helix, see? So there's that number again, where there's another indication of where it kind of all comes together. And that's what I find is like you were talking, the more we delve into different holistic or spiritual concepts, it's like it doesn't separate it. It brings it together more. It just absolutely all fits together, so that's just kind of unfortunate too, that people can't see that they have to have everything in like a little box, that it's not that. It's like where one starts, another one ends, and another one picks up, and it just keeps looping.
They're all into each other. Yeah. Like that's the Western mind though, because that's coming from, I don't want to say a lack of creativity, to the people that named the atom. I mean, because the name of the atom meant atomos, meant uncuttable. Because we assumed at that time that we couldn't get any further down than that. That was it. It was autonomous. It was all by itself. We couldn't, you break that apart, it's just two pieces of an atom.
Yeah, now we got like,
and now we're like, we're way deeper in. And that's another thing that fascinates me. It's like, scientifically speaking, it's like this weird thing where the deeper you look at something, the deeper it seems to be. I mean, the same thing happens when we view space. Now we're now able to see and understand things that we never understood before, but every answer comes with 10 new questions, and I think that's the beauty of it, because it's in that journey of discovery. That's why we're here. Right. Well, that's why I like what you said is you're a learner. I mean, that's what lifelong learner.
Yeah, that's how we look at ourselves. Is we're just learn. We know that
curious.
We know that we know nothing.
Very curious.
That's why we're looking into stuff, because we know we'll never know it, but we'll at least understand it or feel it or resonate with it, or So it's never to us. It's never so much like an understanding, I think, as so much as it's just a coexistence. I think is really what we're trying to like. That's what we're working towards, man.
Just trying to understand it all. But then it's funny how much of that understanding comes with self-realization too, though.
But that's why I call it. It's more of just like you literally just got to be okay. It's like, you know what? It just is what it is.
I don't understand it yet, but I'm okay with it.
Dude, that's coexistence.
It's accepting what is.
Yeah, that's why I like the word coexistence. But yeah, we should probably.
I was going to say, I think we've got a nice warm up. And we should take a break
I
now.
have two questions.
Okay.
You can't save them for my Tellin. You got to put them out now. All right, fine. Go ahead.
All right. Wait, no, I'll wait then.
You do it. Come on. It's what the green room's for. We're here to, go ahead.
So with numbers, I know that you were saying like the date of your birth has significance, but I'm curious, like, does the date of your death have significance as well? Like, so if you have someone that is passed and you have like their beginning and their end date, like what's the significance of like their
It means you're longer.
So
please finish my thought for me.
So, well, I'm going to just tell you something really odd about me, and I hope nobody locally watches this from my hometown because they already think I'm a spazzo nutcase anyway. But when I go to funerals, that's what I do is I sit and I do the people's charts, like while they're doing the program, like I do their name, I figure what, because all the information is there, the day they were born, their full name, so I sit and I add the numbers in my head, and that gives me insight into what they were. And then I look at it, it's kind of an affirmation, like, oh yeah, they were totally into all of these things. And that's what that says and stuff too. So absolutely, the day that you die tells you about the time of death, the time of birth, like it all means something, with that. And so, so you have to take a look at what do all of those things mean. And my dad, was old. He was in his 90s, and he said that, he had sat us down at dinner one night, and he wasn't doing the best, but he said, girls, I don't want you to be sad, but I'm going to die soon. and we're like, what? And he said, oh yeah. He said, I've looked in the book and I've seen that I had these different choices. And he said, and I'm ready to take one. And he was going to be 92. So it isn't like, he was going to, but he could have lived longer. He said, he just said he was ready and the time was coming and he didn't want us to be sad. And within a couple of months he was dead. And it was just, but like I said, he was ailing anyway, but he didn't have cancer or anything like that. He died of old age. And so, I knew that it was going to happen. I was like, oh my God, like, please don't die on my birthday. And because it was close to my birthday, and he died on March 17th. And so, 3 is the number of, that inner child. What?
It is St. Patty's Day.
Yeah, it is. So I'll never look at that day the same way again. But, it was on a 1/7 day. So, and it was in 2017. So there was all these 1s and 7s, which were about spirituality. The 3 is about sort of that inner child, doing those kinds of things and stuff with that too. So absolutely the day that we die, like I believe that we pick the day we're born and the time we're born. And I believe then that we get to choose from our life contract which one of those exit times that we want to take. And I believe that the numbers and the times that we have give us a story that complete that kind of thing with that too. So, so that's not a weird question at all. Like, but I can't predict when you're going to die if that was what you were going to ask.
No, it's just, I recently had a friend that passed. And while you're talking about the birthday, I was like, I wonder if your death date has anything to do with anything. And it was just, and then we're talking about the cycle of life, the beginning and the end. And I'm just like, okay, well, if that's a thought process, then your beginning date, it means something. And then your end date would mean something too. So in the process of the circle of life, I was just.
Sounds like it tells your story, apparently. I mean, it sounds like it's just a retelling of your story.
I'm very intrigued with this.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's so crazy because you don't look at numbers the same way. It's more like an organic.
It's a language.
Because I used to think my birthday was cursed.
Like you see situations, you see like a whole world open up where other people just see numbers.
Bro, no,
that's crazy.
She's Neo in the Matrix. You're seeing the code. No, you're like reading the data. You see like the green print running back and forth instead of the general representation of these molecules resonating on a frequency that gives us a literal mass to perceive. Like,
I mean, I look at even like things that happen, like different tragedies and things like that too. Like I had a newspaper that interviewed me back with 9/11 because the targets all came up to master numbers. And then if you did the thing, and then the flight numbers added up to certain times. And if you looked at the sequency of the number of people that were on the plane, and then if you looked at the times that the planes actually crashed, the Twin Towers even looked like an 11. There's all of these things. And then I did the names for what I had the information based on. I didn't have their full names, but I did the names for the terrorists, and they all had either 5s or 11s. And 5 is about risk, change, variety, and freedom and courage. And 11 is about lessons of spirituality. And so that's what they thought they were doing. They thought that they were teaching us lessons of change and freedom and spirituality with all of that kind of stuff. And you can look at the same thing. Like I look at, if a shooting happens, like I'll look at what time was the shooting, how many people were involved, what city did it happen? Like, and then you can look at joyful things too. You can look at something that's happened that's been very positive, or, things with that too. But I always look at, what do the numbers tell me? Like, what's that hidden message? What's the frequency? What's that vibration? What is that place in the universe? Like, what is it? You talked about the raindrop, because the raindrops hit the water and it causes a ripple. So what was the ripple of that day? What was the real underlying, significance of that particular event with that? If that.
I'm loving all of this. Yeah. We need
to take a break.
Let's take a break. Come back and do I'm telling you here in a hot minute. But yeah, that's this has been amazing.
15. What are we doing? What time is it?
We can talk about that later. Okay. You should wrap the show.
Yeah.
What now?
So if you want to go ahead and
shameless
plug again.
Yeah, go ahead. Tell the people who you are, where to find you. Go ahead, throw it back out there again.
Okay. Well, go to rhondareif.com, and it's RHONDAREIF.com. And from there, you can find me every other way. My phone number's there. You can read about me. I have other websites. I think that they're listed on there. I also have my own podcast. It's something I didn't mention. I've been doing a radio show since before radio was cool, since 1994. So I've been doing that for almost 30 years now, that I have a regular show. And they've recently started, saving them and putting them with podcasts. So you can go to kvr.com. That's also listed on my website. And I've done some other shows too. So you can get to the YouTube channel and my LinkedIn, my Facebook. Facebook's probably the easiest way to get me. But, all that information, rhondareif.com. And I do have a book out. It's a children's book. It's about Serena and the Butterflies, about my dog, and a true story and the life lessons she taught me. And I also have a relaxation CD that's I wrote about for my own healing, but it's all different ways to relax and cope with stress and take you on a little healing journey. And soon I got the book coming out, Numbers You Can Count On, where you're going to find out all of this really incredible information we've been talking about. But it's at the editor right now. So that's a work in progress.
Nice.
Thank you so much for being on.
I love that title too.
Thanks.
Numbers you can count on.
Yeah. Took me a while to come up with it. It had to be just perfect, and then it had to have the right number vibration when I got done with it too. So
that's why I said you're on a level of you're speaking a language. That's literally what you've done, is you've deciphered in a completely different language that we're all speaking. We're just unaware of it.
Mm-hmm.
This is huge.
Well, we all make decisions and are affected by it, but we don't even realize it.
Agreed. But yeah, let's wrap this up. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do I'm Telling You. So
this has been another Green Room with Mr. Gemini.
Philly D.
Clickety clack, a fact checker, Miss JD.
And our amazing guest,
Rhonda Reif.
Yeah, fam, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you. Go ahead and push that button in a hot second. But as always, be good to yourself. Be good to everything else.
Much love.
Peace.
So what am I supposed to push?
You're all good. I just where's there?